Welcome to this session of Sustainability Open Space. Today we are going to discuss an important area of sustainability, food security and agriculture. Let us together explore these topics deeper. Afterwards, we can reflect together on our thoughts and ideas regarding these matters. Before we begin, here is the content that we will cover. The first part that we are going to explore is the business environment, with global food security, agriculture, and the situation in Finland. After this, we'll explore further with a proposal to these challenges and conclude with the proposal's significance in reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's begin. Today there are over 7.7 billion people on this planet. By 2030, the United Nations estimates that we will reach 8.5 billion people and 9 billion people by 2050. The well-being of individuals that make up societies depends on the nutrition that we receive from our food. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, World Food Program, and Children's Fund UNICEF, the amount of undernourishment increased by 4% from a record low in 2015 with 785 million people to 820 million people in 2018. Further, it was found that 65 of the 77 countries between 2011 and 2017, which had the increase, also experienced an economic slowdown or downturn. And that these countries were also highly dependent on the import and export of commodities. Globalization has increased the interdependency among nations, and we can see how these interdependencies are influencing global food security. For example, in 2008, there was a global economic crash due to the irresponsible lending practices and corruption on Wall Street in the United States. The result of this rippled through the world and could be seen in the price of rice, which increased by 300% within a year. Further examples can be seen in the trade war that has been going on between the United States and China for the past several years, which has resulted in the price volatility of soy. Currently, we are seeing a global pandemic of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. This is leading to the disruption of the global supply chain and manufacturers, as the world begins to see how interdependent we are. Situations like this can pose a great threat to a nation's food security. Another element that affects the food security of a nation is the climate. Through the recording of weather patterns over the last century, there have been the emerging signs of a changing global climate. For example, there has been a marked increase in extreme weather events such as droughts, cyclones, and floods. The United Nations had predicted in 2019 that the consequence of such extreme weather events could leave 45 million people of 16 nations with severe food insecurity. Another marked example is in the United States. According to the statistics from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, billion-dollar weather and climate disasters are on the rise. From a mere 3 in 1980 up to 14 annually. And severe storms have been on the increase as well, from 0 recorded in 2000 to 80 a year between 2016 and 2019. Other signs of the changing climate include the changes in global temperature. NOAA recorded 2019 as the second warmest year in 140 years, with October and November being some of the warmest on record globally, such as in Europe, Asia, the Caribbean, South America, Australia, and New Zealand. It was also recorded that the sea ice in Antarctica was 12.8% lower than the average that was recorded between 1981 and 2010. In 2020, NOAA recorded that in January, the global land and ocean surface temperature was at its highest in 141 years. In Finland, January has been the second warmest on record. And for 60% of the country, it has been the warmest. Agriculture is where our food comes from. It is dependent on the climate, and it is essential to a nation's food security. Agriculture influences and is influenced by the global marketplace. For example, the increase in deforestation of the Brazilian Amazon is also influenced by the global soy demand. Land cleared for agriculture has harmful effects on the environment, including habitat loss and loss of biodiversity. The environment and climate are circularly connected. What happens to the environment affects the climate, and what happens to the climate affects the environment. This also includes many things that humans do. Conventional agriculture is a major source of environmental contaminants, including fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. These pollutants can have harmful effects on the environment long after their use, the consequences of which threaten biodiversity, especially sensitive life forms. Also, the amount of distance food needs to cover to reach consumers has an embodied energy cost. With conventional agriculture and globalization, food is traveling a vast distance before they reach the consumer. The consequences of these are the use of fossil fuels, which cause environmental damages from their extraction, which also risk creating environmental disasters such as oil spills, and they are also a contributor to greenhouse gases, which can influence climate change. And another thing, they contribute to toxic aerosols that we have to breathe daily. Additionally, conventional agriculture is resource heavy, and this puts a strain on natural resources, such as water. This has been connected to shortages and droughts, and this can threaten food security and can be particularly threatening to already food insecure regions. Finland is a Nordic country with a population of over 5 million. To better understand the present situation, we must first look to the past. In the 1940s, 50% of people worked on farms. Currently, that is less than 4% due to urbanization. Around 40% of Finland's primary crops are cereal, while nearly 30% of their crops are fodder for livestock. Not uniquely to the world, the farmers are dependent on subsidies to make these crops profitable. For example, subsidies made up 32% of gross returns in 2015. According to these statistics, Finland depends on a massive import of vegetables. This has resulted in a deficit of the food trade balance of import and exports. This is also an ongoing trend due to their large volume of fruit and vegetable imports. The food security of Finland is threatened by the following. Its primary crops, cereal, are dependent on subsidies to be profitable to the farmers. The changing climate increases the uncertainty of yield and creates yield variability in an already challenging climate for agriculture, with its long cold seasons and cooler climate. Finland currently depends on a significant volume of fruit and vegetable imports, which cause a trade deficit and a supply chain vulnerability if the supplies were to be disrupted. Additionally, Finland is one of the not so many countries facing an aging population. In 1999, there were around 750,000 people over the age of 65. This is predicted to hit its peak in 2030, with an estimated of over 1.3 million people over the age of 65. Elderly could be especially at risk of a disruption to the food supply chain. Elderly are especially at risk to malnutrition, and the prices of food rich in micronutrients is also a discouraging factor to consumption. It was found by the World Health Organization that cardiovascular risk could be cut by 30% just by increasing the daily intake of fruits and vegetables by 1 or 2 servings. For all these examples mentioned previously, we have evidence to indicate the interconnectedness of the world. Civilization requires food security. Food security depends on agriculture, and agriculture depends on the climate. Unsustainable practices in the supply chain and agriculture can leave a nation food insecure and also threaten their economy, the environment, and the climate that we all share. Additionally, with the increase in urbanization, the growing global population, and countries such as Finland with an aging population, they need to take all of these factors into account into their future urban planning to support sustainable development and address these threats and weaknesses to their nation's food security.